Looking back, it's almost funny how perfect everything seemed. I was weeks away from marrying the love of my life, Lauren, and I couldn't have been happier. We'd been together for nearly 5 years, and though our journey hadn't been without its bumps, I truly believed we were stronger for it. Our son, Jimmy, had just turned 1. He was our world, a bright-eyed, curious little boy who made every day feel like an adventure. Lauren and I had decided to wait to get married until we were more settled, both emotionally and financially. We were each 25 years old. That's the age when the wind walks in your head. Honestly, we were young and figuring ourselves out when we found out she was pregnant. It was overwhelming at first, but we made it work. By the time Jimmy arrived, it felt like we were finally ready to take the next step. The wedding was meant to be a celebration of everything we'd overcome together. I was so caught up in the excitement that I didn't notice the cracks starting to show. Lauren seemed distracted at times, but I chalked it up to wedding stress. My best friend, Michael, however, saw things differently. Michael and I had grown up together. He was the kind of friend who could read me like a book, and when he saw how happy I was, he hesitated to say anything. But one evening, as we sat on the back porch, sipping beers and talking about the future, he broke the silence. "Ryan, there's something I've been meaning to tell you," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "And I'm only saying this because I care about you." The weight in his tone immediately put me on edge. I laughed it off, telling him he sounded like he was about to give me a lecture. But Michael wasn't joking. "There's been talk about Lauren, stuff I didn't want to believe at first, but I think you deserve to know," he began, carefully choosing his words. "Some people are saying she's been seeing other people, and man, there's a chance Jimmy might not be yours." I froze. For a moment, I couldn't process what he'd just said. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I wanted to laugh it off, to accuse Michael of making up some ridiculous story. But deep down, something didn't feel right. "You're wrong," I said, my voice shaking. "Lauren wouldn't do that. She loves me. And Jimmy, he's my son." Michael looked at me with a mix of pity and frustration. "I hope I'm wrong, Ryan. I really do. But I needed to tell you. You can't go into this marriage blind." That night, I couldn't sleep. His words echoed in my mind, making me question everything I thought I knew about my life. I wanted to believe he was wrong. I needed him to be wrong. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was already taking root. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. Every time I looked at Jimmy, my heart clenched. He was still the same bright-eyed boy I'd loved since the moment he was born. But now there was a crack in my perception, a whisper of doubt I couldn't ignore. Lauren noticed something was off almost immediately. "You okay?" she asked over breakfast, glancing at me from across the table. "Yeah, just tired," I replied, forcing a smile. I wasn't ready to bring up what Michael had told me, not without proof. The doubt gnawed at me all day, until I couldn't take it anymore. That afternoon, while Lauren was out running errands, I dug out one of Jimmy's old baby blankets and drove to a clinic an hour away. The nurse at the counter barely glanced at me as I handed over the sample for a paternity test. She just gave me a clipboard, had me fill out some forms, and told me the results would take about a week. That week was the longest of my life. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't focus at home. Lauren kept asking me if everything was okay, and every time I gave her the same half-hearted response. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering what I'd do if the test confirmed Michael's suspicions. Finally, the call came. My heart was pounding as I picked up the phone. The voice on the other end was calm, clinical, completely detached from the bombshell she was about to drop. "Mr. Ryan, I'm sorry to inform you, but the results indicate you are not the biological father of the child." I don't remember much after that. The phone fell out of my hand and I just sat there, staring into space. A part of me wanted to believe it was a mistake, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Everything started to make sense. The timing of Lauren's pregnancy, the moments she'd seemed distant, even the little things I'd brushed off as stress or bad days. That night, I didn't go home. I drove around aimlessly for hours trying to figure out what to do. My mind was a storm of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. How could she do this to me? How could she let me believe Jimmy was my son? When I finally walked through the door, it was nearly midnight. The house was dark except for the soft glow of the lamp in the living room. Lauren was curled up on the couch, her phone in hand. The moment she saw me, she sat up, her face a mixture of relief and irritation. "Where have you been, Ryan? I've been calling you all night," she said, her voice sharp with frustration. I closed the door behind me, leaning against it for a moment to gather myself. My chest felt like it was about to explode. I knew this conversation would change everything. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and deliberate. Lauren frowned, her irritation melting into confusion. "What's going on? Why do you look like that?" I walked into the living room, standing a few feet away from her. "I know, Lauren," I said quietly, almost a whisper. Her brow furrowed. "Know what? Ryan, you're scaring me. I know Jimmy isn't mine." The words felt like acid leaving my mouth. Her face went pale. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just stared at me as if I'd spoken in another language. "What are you talking about?" she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had a paternity test done," I said, forcing the words out. "The results came back today." The room fell silent. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Lauren's lips parted as if she were about to say something, but no sound came out. Finally, she spoke. "Ryan, I can explain," she stammered, tears already welling up in her eyes. "Explain?" I snapped, my voice rising despite myself. "Explain what, Lauren? That you lied to me? That you let me believe I was Jimmy's father for over a year? What is there to explain?" She stood up, wringing her hands, her words spilling out in a frantic rush. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was just one time, Ryan, I swear. I didn't even think." "One time?" I interrupted, my anger boiling over. "Don't lie to me, Lauren. Don't you dare lie to me again." "I'm not lying," she cried, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake. A stupid, horrible mistake. I didn't know how to tell you. You're such a good man, Ryan, and I didn't want to lose you. You didn't want to lose me, so you decided to lie to me instead? To build our entire future on a lie," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "Did you ever think about what this would do to me? To Jimmy? Or did you just think I'd never find out?" Lauren broke down, covering her face with her hands as she sobbed. "I didn't know what else to do," she choked out. "I was scared. I thought if I told you, you'd leave, and I couldn't handle that. I couldn't raise Jimmy alone." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream at her, to demand how she could do this to me, but I couldn't. The sight of her breaking down in front of me, the weight of everything that had happened, it was too much. "Who is he?" I asked finally, my voice cold and steady. "Jimmy's real father." "Who is he?" Lauren shook her head, her sobs growing louder. "It doesn't matter, Ryan. He's not in the picture. He doesn't even know about Jimmy." "It matters to me," I said, taking a step closer. "Who is he?" She hesitated, her hands trembling. "It was someone I worked with, okay? I don't even talk to him anymore. It was over before Jimmy was even born." I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the wave of emotions threatening to consume me. "So, you not only cheated on me, but you let me take responsibility for his child while the real father walks free. Do you even hear how insane that sounds?" Lauren stepped closer, her hands reaching for mine. "Ryan, please," she begged. "You're Jimmy's father in every way that matters. Biology doesn't change that. You've loved him, raised him. He needs you." I pulled away, shaking my head. "Don't put this on me. Don't use Jimmy as an excuse to fix this mess you created." Tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't find it in myself to comfort her. My trust, my love. It all felt tainted, broken beyond repair. "I need time," I said finally, my voice hollow. "I can't do this right now." "Ryan, don't walk away," she pleaded. "We can fix this. We can go to therapy, whatever it takes. Please don't give up on us." I looked at her, the woman I'd planned to spend my life with, and all I could see was a stranger. "I'm not sure there's anything left to fix, Lauren." Her sobs echoed through the house as I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. I didn't know where I was going, But I knew I couldn't stay. Not after this. Before you find out what happens next, please subscribe to the channel. I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets of our small town that night. My head was spinning, and my heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. Every memory I had of Lauren and Jimmy now felt like a cruel joke. I thought about turning back, about going home and pretending this was all just some awful nightmare. But I couldn't. The betrayal was too deep, the pain too raw. Eventually, I ended up at Michael's place. He opened the door, his face etched with concern as soon as he saw me. "Ryan, what happened?" he asked. "I confronted her," I said, stepping inside. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Dull, lifeless. She admitted it. "Jimmy isn't mine. She lied to me this whole time." Michael's jaw tightened, and he motioned for me to sit down. "I'm sorry, man. I really am. I hoped I was wrong." I sank into the couch, burying my face in my hands. What am I supposed to do, Mike? How do I even begin to pick up the pieces? Michael handed me a beer and sat across from me. "First things first, you need to protect yourself. Legally. If your name is on Jimmy's birth certificate, you could still be on the hook for child support, even if he's not yours." The thought hadn't even crossed my mind, but now it hit me like a ton of bricks. "Are you serious?" I asked, looking up at him. "Dead serious," Michael said. "You need to talk to a lawyer. Figure out your options." I nodded, though the idea of dealing with lawyers and courts only added to my growing list of nightmares. But Michael was right. I couldn't let emotions cloud my judgment. I needed to be smart about this. The next morning, I called my parents. I didn't go into too much detail, just told them that the wedding was off and that Lauren had betrayed me in a way I couldn't forgive. My mom cried, and my dad muttered something about ungrateful women, but they promised to support me no matter what. Then came the hardest call of all. Lauren's parents. They adored Jimmy, and I knew this news would shatter them. When I explained what had happened, there was stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Oh, Ryan," her mom finally said, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to say. We had no idea. We're so sorry." Her father, a stoic man who rarely showed emotion, simply said, "Maybe you're doing the right thing, son, but maybe you shouldn't get so hot. I know it's hard, but maybe you should think it over." I realized he was worried about his daughter, but I didn't say anything back to him. Back at the house, Lauren was waiting for me. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "Ryan," she said softly as I walked in, "can we please talk?" "We've talked enough," I replied, heading straight for the bedroom to pack some clothes. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I need space," I said, not looking at her. "I can't stay here right now." She followed me, desperation creeping into her voice. "Ryan, please don't leave. We can work through this, for Jimmy's sake if nothing else." I spun around, finally meeting her gaze. "For Jimmy's sake," I said, my voice laced with disbelief. "Don't you dare use him to manipulate me, Lauren. You lied to me about everything, about him, about us. How am I supposed to come back from that?" Tears streamed down her face as she reached for me, but I stepped back. "Ryan, I made a mistake, but that doesn't change the fact that we love you. Jimmy loves you. You're the only father he's ever known." Her words stabbed at my already fragile heart. I loved Jimmy. That was the hardest part of all of this, walking away from a child I'd held, fed, rocked to sleep. But he wasn't mine, and no amount of love could change that. "I can't do this," I said, my voice cracking. "I can't be in a house built on lies." I grabbed my bag and walked out the door, leaving Lauren sobbing in the hallway. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there anymore. That night, I went to my parents' place, thinking I'd find some solace there. But the moment I walked in, their worry and unrest only added fuel to the fire burning inside me. My mom's tears and constant questions felt like daggers, while my dad's sharp anger at Lauren made it impossible to think clearly. "Son, you've done enough. She betrayed you in the worst way possible. You deserve better," he said firmly, pacing the living room like a storm brewing. I appreciated their support, but it was too much. I couldn't handle their emotions on top of my own. I needed peace, not more chaos. After a restless hour of trying to calm them down, I grabbed my bag and headed out again. I ended up back at Michael's place, standing on his porch like a lost puppy. He opened the door, a mixture of surprise and concern on his face. "Ryan, you okay?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. "Not really," I admitted. "Is it okay if I crash here? My parents mean well, but I just can't deal with it right now." Michael didn't hesitate. "Of course, man, stay as long as you need. The couch is all yours." I dropped my bag and sank onto the couch with a sigh. For the first time that day, I felt a sliver of relief. Michael didn't push me to talk. He just handed me a blanket and sat nearby, scrolling on his phone while I stared blankly at the ceiling. It wasn't much, but it was exactly what I needed: space to breathe and a friend who understood. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window at Michael's place, pulling me out of a restless sleep. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The events of the past few days felt like a bad dream, but as soon as I saw my packed bag near the couch, reality hit me like a freight train. Michael was already up, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone in the kitchen. "Morning," he said when he noticed me sitting up. "How are you holding up?" I rubbed my face, still groggy. "I don't know, man. One minute I'm angry, the next I feel numb. And then there's Jimmy. I don't even know where to start." Michael nodded. "That's a lot to deal with, but you've got to take it one step at a time. Did you call a lawyer yet?" "No, not yet," I admitted. "I don't even know what to say." Michael pulled out a sticky note and scribbled down a name and number. "Call her. She's good. Help my cousin during his divorce. She'll lay it all out for you." Later that day, I made the call. The lawyer, Rebecca Owens, was a no-nonsense woman who wasted no time getting to the heart of my situation. "So, your name is on the birth certificate?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "Yeah," I replied, my stomach sinking. "Does that mean I'm legally responsible for Jimmy, even though he's not mine?" Rebecca paused before answering. "It depends on the state's laws, but in many cases, yes. However, if we can identify the biological father and prove paternity, you may be able to avoid further obligations." The thought of tracking down one of Lauren's former lovers made my blood boil, but I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "What do I need to do?" "We'll need a copy of the paternity test results, the birth certificate, and any documentation that might help identify the biological father. Once we have that, I can file the necessary paperwork to begin the process." That night, I sat on Michael's couch, staring at the documents Rebecca had emailed me. The sheer weight of everything hit me again. This wasn't just about a broken relationship. It was about unraveling a life I thought was mine. Jimmy's first steps, his giggles, the way he lit up when he saw me, all of it had been a lie. Michael sat down next to me, handing me a beer. "You're doing the right thing, you know." I sighed. "It doesn't feel right. It feels cold, like I'm abandoning him." "You're not abandoning him," Michael said firmly. "You're taking care of yourself. You can't build your future on someone else's lies. Jimmy's a good kid, but he's not your responsibility. That's on Lauren and whoever the real dad is." I nodded slowly, though the guilt still gnawed at me. Deep down, I knew Michael was right, but letting go of the bond one had with Jimmy was going to be one of the hardest things I'd ever done. The next few days passed in a blur. Rebecca worked quickly, and before I knew it, we were preparing to formally challenge the paternity. Lauren didn't take the news well. When I handed her the paperwork, she burst into tears. "You're really doing this?" she sobbed. "You're just going to walk away from him? From us?" I kept my voice steady, though it took everything I had. "This isn't about Jimmy. It's about the lies, Lauren. You put me in an impossible situation, and now I have to fix it." Her tears turned to anger. "Fix it? You're breaking this family apart. Jimmy loves you, Ryan. How can you just abandon him?" I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. "This family fell apart the moment you decided to lie to me. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm making things right." Lauren stormed off, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, the echo of the door ringing in my ears. A part of me wanted to chase after her, to try to salvage something from the wreckage of our lives. But I knew it was pointless. Some things couldn't be fixed. It was during this time that something unexpected happened. A former colleague I'd worked with a few years ago, Emily, reached out. She'd heard through the grapevine about my situation and wanted to offer me a position at her company. The catch? It was in Europe. I know the timing might not be great, she said during our phone call, but it's an incredible opportunity, and honestly, Ryan, I think getting away for a while might be exactly what you need. At first, I hesitated. Moving to a new country, leaving everything behind, it felt drastic. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. This wasn't just a chance to rebuild my career. It was a chance to rebuild my life. When I told Michael, he grinned. Man, you'd be crazy not to take it. A fresh start? New adventures? Sounds perfect. He was right. It was time to leave the past behind and focus on my future. The legal process to remove my name from Jimmy's birth certificate turned out to be far more complicated than I'd expected. Rebecca, my lawyer, was as sharp as they came, but even she warned me that this wouldn't be easy. Ryan, the good news is that you weren't married to Lauren. That gives us some leverage, she explained during one of our meetings. But the courts don't like leaving a child without legal support. We're going to have to push hard to show that you were misled and that this situation isn't your fault. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca and I worked tirelessly to gather every piece of evidence we could. The paternity test was, of course, the cornerstone of our case, but Rebecca also used Lauren's admission of infidelity against her. It wasn't easy. Lauren fought back at every turn, claiming I'd been Jimmy's father in every way that mattered. But Rebecca didn't let up. Finally, the day came when the court ruled in my favor. My name would be removed from Jimmy's birth certificate, and I was no longer legally obligated to provide for him. Relief washed over me, but it was bittersweet. As much as I knew this was the right thing to do, the thought of never being part of Jimmy's life again still hurt. I also forgot to mention that an additional and important condition of our legal victory was that we were able to find the biological father. Rebecca turned her attention to finding Jimmy's biological father. That's where Michael came in. Using his network of mutual friends and acquaintances, he managed to track down someone who seemed to fit the timeline, a guy named Aaron, who had briefly worked with Lauren around the time she got pregnant. When Rebecca and I confronted Aaron with the evidence, his reaction was exactly what I'd expected. He squirmed, denied everything at first, then reluctantly agreed to take a paternity test. The results came back positive. Aaron was Jimmy's father, but instead of stepping up, he did everything he could to avoid taking responsibility. I don't have the money for this, Aaron complained when we pressed him. This is her problem, not mine. Rebecca gave him a steely glare. It's the state's problem now, she said coldly. You can try to dodge, but they'll catch up with you eventually. And with that, Aaron's fate was sealed. The state would handle him from here, and for the first time in months, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Jimmy would no longer be my legal responsibility, and the truth about his parentage was finally out. As I packed my bags for Europe, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. It was hard to believe how much my life had changed in such a short time. I'd gone from planning a wedding and raising a family to walking away from it all. But as painful as it was, I knew I'd made the right choice. Better to know the truth now than years down the line, I thought. The scars from this experience would stay with me, but they'd also taught me valuable lessons. I'd been blind to the red flags, too trusting, too eager to believe in a future that wasn't real. I remembered some of the advice I'd read from others who had gone through similar situations. Always use protection. Always verify paternity before signing anything. Never trust blindly, no matter how honest or loving someone seems. These lessons weren't just for me. They were for anyone who might find themselves in a situation like mine. As my flight took off, I stared out the window at the horizon, feeling a strange mix of sadness and hope. The life I'd left behind was gone, but the future was wide open. Europe would be my fresh start, a chance to rebuild on a foundation of truth and self-respect. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. I wish you a great mood and good luck.